Heyo, and welcome back to another video. In this one, what I wanted to talk about today was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's new update that will be coming out on June 3rd. We believe the patch will release simultaneously on all platforms once that version is, of course, released. However, Square Enix, the company that loves to release ports on the PC and abandons them, does it again. What do I mean? There's no issues with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on the PC, right? Spoiler, obviously there still is, and Square Enix has yet to address these issues and has not gone back to patch them. Now, if your game is stuttering on a 5090 or a 4090 or a 4080 or even a 4070, I think there is issues with your game that should have been more thoroughly tested on than just releasing it to the public. Now, I do recall there was some outdated SSD kind of thing, controller thing in the game that they had to update, but it still kind of didn't really do much in terms of fixing the stuttering. So it is kind of aggravating in that sense that we still have this issue. That still occurs, but more or less the issue that I talked about a while ago, and that is the character models within game. If you go to use photo mode at any point, even in cutscenes, the game will melt the actual textures, like Cloud's hair, the eyes, like literally everything, if you leave it on one frame for a long time in photo mode. I don't know what this issue is, if it's related to DLSS. The game runs DLSS 4 now, which before, if you injected it before the NVIDIA app came out and whatever, you would run into quite a few issues. But now it seems like some of that's fixed, but of course the issues that I'm speaking about haven't been. And this issue has not been fixed within a year of its initial release, which is kind of crazy to say. It's been kind of over a year. It's been a year and a month, but obviously releasing an update now negates the fact that there's going to be an update in the future that adds these new casual playstyles, if you will. Well, that's what I'm calling them, because one hitting all the enemies is kind of ridiculous. Regardless to say, I'm just a bit aggravated with the fact that Square Enix releases a port and does nothing, and they just sit on it and literally don't fix any of the issues that people have been complaining about because they're trying to make other ports or focusing on Remake Part 3. But the issue with that is, if there's issues in Rebirth, the second part of this thing, of this trilogy, right? How are these issues going to be fixed in Part 3, right? If you didn't initially fix it in Part 2 and it's using the same engine. So that's where my frustration anyway comes through, where they like to do this and they have never went back to a port and like kind of kept it up to date. Like Final Fantasy 13, great example of that, where you can kind of get it playable, but it's notorious on NVIDIA GPUs, depending what one you have, to basically what my issue was anyways, cut off half the screen, that basically running at 15 frames per second, and then the other one's running the actual game, like literally cut in half. That's the best way I can explain it. And yeah, like obviously that's more of an outdated port, but there's still no excuse that Square Enix is still kind of selling it on the store in that condition for any money. There's a long laundry list that you have to literally do to get Final Fantasy 13 to run. I think Final Fantasy 15 and I think 16 more recently were like the most stable and probably the best ports of Final Fantasy that had released, but still, although this port's good, it's still not great. And my main thing with how the content creators that were covering this port was like, oh, this is the best port ever that Square Enix made, this, that, and the other thing, but they can do better. They're one of the big RPG makers, and you wouldn't think that they'd still be this behind. Capcom, despite the de novo BS, they at least have a lot of options for you to choose from. Now, what I suspect to be the issue, without the game being in a cutscene, right, you can't really tinker with what resolution the character models are at. So you're essentially just kind of doing a render scale constantly within the game and hoping for the best, which really isn't great at the end of the day. I really hope Part 3 has more in-depth graphics options for their games, but going forward with this port, after the Switch 2 update, that's what I'm dubbing it as, releases, like, I'm really hoping that they do fix these issues that people have been talking about for a while now. And I did try to enable DSR, but DSR kind of acts weird, especially if you have a lower resolution display. So it worked, but it kind of just was janky a bit. But that isn't to say I have a slouch of a GPU. I literally have a 4080 Super and a 9800X 3D. So performance-wise, everything's great. Just graphics-wise, something needs to be fixed, is my main thing. I'm not experiencing the stutters nearly as I was at launch. Obviously, the shaders aren't all being compiled sometimes, but that is what you get with some PC games and some jankiness. But to have this much jankiness, and especially with the character model specifically, that doesn't happen with the PS5 version, the PS5 Pro version, is kind of aggravating, to say the least. I just wish there was more customizable options within the graphics menu. That is something that should be really focused on part 3, especially if they're not going to sacrifice graphics for the main quality of the game. And I think character models should be definitely important to that. And I did try to run DLSS 4.5 rather than 4.0, but when I injected it with NVIDIA's app, the game decides to maybe run for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe even 20, and then crash. So what kind of stinks with using DLSS is you have to kind of keep it up to date when a new DLSS releases, at least through NVIDIA's software. I know there's a way to inject it, but I don't know if that's like a foolproof way of it not crashing when you inject it. In my testing, it made the results a bit better, but not, perfect. Because it's unstable to run DLSS 4.5, and I really don't recommend it. But I will say the image quality with this specifically was a bit better with preset M. I don't think I can even play the game long enough to get into a scenario where I can show you guys that it's slightly better, because I can just do it for a split second and then it crashes. So that's why there's no footage of it, if you were curious. But obviously do your own testing at your discretion if you are having the same kind of issues, but just know it does crash with DLSS 4.5 through the NVIDIA app. I don't know if injecting it is any better, but I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below, because I'm just frustrated at the end of the day that they still haven't gone through and fixed these issues, and it's been a year since the port's been out, which is why I'm just saying, will they fix it? Because honestly, it just doesn't seem like they're going to fix it at this point, because it feels all but abandoned. And this is what Square Enix does, and I think to some level they need to be criticized for it. And I really do love Final Fantasy VII as a whole, and it just stinks to essentially see this. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.